So this is a video that's going to be all about snapping components of objects in ZBrush. And that's, as of this recording, I should specify. If something comes out that has new functionality, I'll put in the description of this video, hey, you know, things have been updated. But as of right now, I'm just going to go over a few techniques to snap things. So we're going to go over here to our tool palette, and we're going to grab a plane 3D, drag it onto our canvas, go into edit mode. We can turn on polyframe. You're going to see here's our components, and by that I just mean a vert, an edge, or a face. Of course, this is a primitive, so if I try to sculpt on it, it's going to say, hey, you need to convert this, because you can go down here to initialize and make these changes. So we're going to say, make polymesh 3D. It's a nice sculptable mesh now. And if we want to simplify this, there's a little hack in here. You can go in here to geometry, hit reconstruct a couple times, and then hit delete higher. And then now we have a nice simple plane. I'm going to go in here to my material. I'm going to switch this to Skin Shader 4 so we can see it a little bit easier. And then again, we have polyframe turned on so we can see our components. Let's go to the ZModeler brush. That's BZM. And now we're in ZModeler. And then I can hold down Alt and I can just like randomly paint through here to just paint a stripe down here. And then I'm going to hover over a face, hold down space bar. We're going to say delete a single poly, and we can just delete all those. So now, how do I snap this vert, for example, to this one? Well, it's built into ZModeler, luckily. You can hover over a vertex or a point, hold down the space bar, and then you're going to see it's already set to, by default, move by brush radius, and you're going to see an attraction balance there. You're also going to see snap to surface, which is totally useful, which we'll get to in a second. But this attraction balance allows me to go in here and just move this vert. So again, we hovered over a point, and then we can move this point into within a distance of another point, and it'll automatically snap to that point. So that's totally easy. You can do it with edges, but it won't be hovering over an edge and going, hey, I want to move an edge, because you see there's no attraction balance there. But you can do an extrude edge, and you're going to see in here we do have attraction. So there's no attraction, normal attraction, and smart attraction. So if you go into just, again, hover over an edge with your ZModeler brush, hold down spacebar, extrude, and then smart attraction is already turned on. Now you can extrude an edge, and when you get close to another object, it'll go ahead and snap shut. You can go over here and you can snap this shut. So again, you can use points to snap, you can use edges to snap, and this one you see it's not going to have a straight line, but you know, we can actually align those edges. I'll show you that in a second. So again, very quickly go through here, and in fact on this one you can hold down Alt, and then you can take an entire row, or I'm not, sorry, don't, you just tap Alt, and that'll switch to single edge to full edge. And if you hold down Alt at that point, you can actually go in here and you can inset an entire edge. So again, you can just move this entire edge ring over here and then snap it. Now that last one seemed a little bit like it didn't quite snap all the way. Well, you can also go in here to geometry, modify topology, and you're going to see there's a weld point, so you can go ahead and hit that, and that'll go ahead, and anything that's really close together, it'll go ahead and weld them up. For this last little bit here, you can go through here, and again with your ZModeler brush, BZM, hover over a point, and again just move this over and snap it. Or you can go in here, while we're in here, modify topology, close holes. That'll go ahead and close any open holes. However, it did also kind of collapse those corners now. Because this isn't a closed mesh, it is, see how it's kind of open on one side so you can actually see through it. It's going to want to close that entire open surface on the back. So in this instance, another thing you can do, you can hover over an edge with ZModeler brush, and you can say close, concave or convex in this case doesn't really matter, and then you just tap on there, and that'll go ahead and close that. Now for these down here, for alignment, you can hold down Control and Alt, hit W, hold down Alt, and set this gizmo pivot. You can hold down Shift to kind of set it, and then you can just Z-scale back, although in this case it's kind of a Y-scale back. Alternatively, you can also hold down Control Shift and go in here to like clip curve, and then you can just clip all these points back. And even if it is like interior points, like hey, you just hold down Control and drag out a mask here, and it's like, okay, I want to move these points only, then Control tap to invert so that all these are all unmasked, or I guess you can also hold down Control Alt and then just unmask these points, and then hold down Control Shift and clip curve, and you can just pull these points in any direction you'd like. Or like I said, you can just select a point with your gizmo and then just scale back to that point. There is an alignment in edges, so you can hover over an edge here and you can say align edge strip. It may or may not work in this case, but I'm going to select this edge, and yeah, it's in this case it's not going to work. Like I said, it's easy enough just to unmask these, select a point you do want to snap it to, and then you can just scale those back. Now just for fun, I'm going to go back through here and I'm going to, paint just a random white strip through here, and again we'll say delete a single poly, and I'm going to wrap this to another surface. So I'm going to go in here to my subtools, I'm going to say append, just a sphere is fine, and since I already had a Polymesh 3D and I appended a primitive, it automatically converted it to a Polymesh 3D. So I'm going to move this back behind here, I'm going to scale this up just a bit, and I'm going to select our plane again. And there's actually a couple different ways you can snap these verts to this surface. You can go in here to B to open up the brush menu, M. You can go down here to BMM, which is the MatchMaker brush, then just click in the middle of here and then drag, and it'll go ahead with your Z intensity set at 100, it'll go ahead and move those verts into place so that it matches the curvature of that surface. Alternatively, if I hit Control Z, we'll hit W, hold down Alt, and tap on the surface. I'm going to go into Transpose Cloth, so we're going to hit B for brush, T for transpose, and then instead of regular transpose, I'm going to go in here to Transpose Cloth, which is C. So when you select that, and then you pull back against the surface, of course, before we do that, go in here to Dynamics. I'm just going to move this Dynamics menu over, and we're going to say Collision Volume. So we're going to go ahead and turn this on, and then now this unselected object will be our collision volume. So now when I pull back, these are going to snap to the underlying surface there. So now those are sitting on top of that surface. Now, it's not exact. You can see it's just hovering over that just a bit. You can take this inflate down to 0, and that'll ensure that there is no gap between these. So now when I move this back, again, it's going to go right onto that object. So now we have a slight curvature to our mesh. And again, we're snapping to the surface of this object. In fact, if we go down here, let's go to our regular transpose again. So BTR will get us back into regular transpose mode, so it's not a cloth transpose. To ensure for sure that these points are sitting on the surface of this object, I'm going to go down here to Geometry. I'm sorry, Subtool, and there is a project here. So in this instance, we have this object showing, and you can have multiple objects showing and you can snap to multiple objects, but right now we just have one object selected. If I go into solo mode here, because it's our plane, and then we have this object that's visible. So if I go down here to project all, it's going to project all these points to that surface. So for instance, just to kind of illustrate this a little bit better, if I go through here with my move brush and I just kind of move some of these points off just a bit from that surface, and it's like, okay, I want to project these back, simply have that selected, go down here to project all, and within a certain distance, it'll go ahead and project those points back to the surface here. So in fact, if I move all of these out just a bit, and then I say project all, it's going to snap all of those points to the nearest visible surface that we have. So now that I have this, I can go down here to transparent. I'm going to turn off ghost. So now we can kind of see our selected object here, and here's our surface. So now when I go into my ZModeler brush, BZM, and I hover over a point, I can say move by brush radius, and now I have a snap to surface. So it's not free move anymore. I can just change that to snap to surface. So now as I'm moving, it'll snap to the underlying surface, and when I get to within a certain radius, it'll go ahead and snap to that other object. Now, I could go in here and I could say with my ZModeler brush, hover over an edge, hold down spacebar, and we want to do an extrude edge, and we can extrude this edge over. And again, when we previously did this, it has multiple edges selected. So I'm going to drag this out, tap Alt once to just go into single edge, and now I can go edge by edge and fill these gaps here. So instead of doing a single point, I can go edge by edge. And again, I still have snap to surface enabled, which I think extrude, we have it set to free move. Let's go ahead and set that to snap to surface. So now if I want to go out here and continue extruding an edge out, it'll go ahead and snap to our surface. And if I want to do multiple rows now, I can hold down or tap Alt once, and that'll go ahead and move multiple edges down. If it doesn't quite snap, remember, geometry, modify topology, mirror, and I have a custom menu for this. Here's our weld points. And if it doesn't quite weld, you can take this weld distance and crank it up. And then eventually, there we go, up around 10, it went ahead and welded those points together for me. Now let's go ahead and turn off the visibility of that sphere. And then with my ZModeler brush, I'm going to go in here, hover over a face, hold down spacebar, and say, let's do an extrude polygroup all. I'm going to pull this out. So now we have thickness to this object. And now I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to paint a strip straight down here. I'm going to hover over a face, say QMesh, polygroup all. I'm going to pull this one back, and that's going to automatically kind of extrude those faces back, but also sew up those remaining spaces. This and QMesh is a really cool brush for this. So QMesh, a single poly this time, we can just pull this over and it'll automatically, once it gets to a certain distance, automatically snap to that other surface. And you can even do the opposite. You can pull this one over and it'll delete surfaces. So you can like pull back through and you can put a hole through something and it'll automatically give you that wall thickness there. Or you can use it as kind of a bridge component and it'll go through and just kind of bridge over or bridge down and automatically weld. So if I hold down shift and smooth, you're going to see those are nice and welded. An alternative to this too, if I undo back through here, is if you have, I'm going to just go ahead and hold down Alt and I'm going to mark this entire side here. And then, well, here's another thing we could do. This will make this a little bit easier. Let's go down here to polygroups and we're going to do a group by normal. So all my normal angles will give me a separate polygroup. So now I can hover over a face, spacebar, delete polygroup all. I'm going to get rid of this over here and I'm going to get rid of this over here. So I can see both sides. I'm going to go down here to display properties double. And now you can see I have two open holes on this object. One open hole here and one open hole here. So now if I want to close these holes, I can. I can hover over an edge like we did before. And I can say, you know, close convex hole or concave hole and just close this hole if I want to. But I can also bridge two holes. So if I want to hover over an edge and I want to say bridge two holes, now I can click here, click on, click on that open edge here, and then click on this open edge here, and it'll go ahead and bridge those two. And if you don't want the line between them, no problem, just hover over an edge, say insert, single edge loop, hold down Alt, and then just get rid of that edge. And then if you want to clean these polygroups up, just go back to your polygroups, say group by normals, and there you go. So always remember, if you want to kind of bridge the gap between something, bridge operations probably a little bit easier than, you know, extruding every single edge or something like that. But that's snapping components. Let's talk about snapping subtools. So I'm going to go ahead and, you know, we don't really need these anymore. I'm going to hop over here. We're going to grab a cube 3D this time. And we can say make polymesh 3D. And we have a cube and, you know, we have a polarized cap. If you want to change that, a couple different ways you can do that. One easy way is if you have any solid or 3D sculptable objects, let's make polymesh 3D, go in here to initialize now. Then your initialize options have changed. We're going to hit Q cube, and this will give you just a nice simple cube. Of course, you can change your X, Y, and Z res, but this is fine. To make a copy of this, I'm going to hit W. Well, let's keep it simple. I'm going to go up here to duplicate. So now we have two subtools here. I'm going to hit W and then just move this one over. We'll go ahead and turn off transparency. So now we have two completely separate subtools. So now, what if I want to move, you know, the faces on this object here to the faces of this object here? That's a little bit trickier. We do have align tools in here. So we have, in fact, we have an entire video about it. I'm not going to go in detail here, but if I just type in snap on my YouTube channel, here we go. Align and distribute objects. You can snap edges, lowest points, evenly space objects, and more. But that's not really going to solve snapping one object to another. In fact, to make this a little bit more interesting, let's hit W. So now our gizmo is in the middle of this selected object here. And I'm going to hit B for brush, I for insert mesh brush. I'm going to go in here to industrial parts. I'm going to select this one. And with the gizmo activated, I can go up here and I can actually swap this mesh out with any of these meshes here. So let's go ahead and choose like a Phillips head screw. And then, you know, if you want to, you can scale this down or whatever you want to do. So now we're thinking, okay, I want to put this, the back of this screw here onto this object over here. How do I go about doing that? So you can see what I can do is I can alt tap between these two objects here. So I can select this object or select this object by alt tapping it, or I can go through here and I can just tap on them in my subtool menu. If I want, I can hold down alt and I can tap on this object so that the gizmo inherits kind of that flat surface behind here. And then I can hold down shift and rotate this around. And then I can go in here and I can just kind of stick it here, but there is no, without scripting, as far as I know, there is no way to go like, hey, this flat surface, stick it to this flat surface over here. However, if I want to put a bunch of screws onto this box, the best way to do that is with IMM brushes, and that's exactly what this brush is. So if I hit Q, then we go back to our box here, and I go to BI brush insert, and I select my industrial parts, and I have a bunch of stuff up here, and I select a Phillips type screw, and I just drag it onto my object. You're going to see, oh, there's my screw. And in fact, if I want them to be all the same size, I can go through here, and I can tap S on my keyboard, or go up here to draw size, and I can set my brush size. Let's go to this side here so we can see a little bit easier. Tap S, drag out a brush size here, and then as I drag this out, hold down Control, and that'll snap to the brush size. So now I can go through here, and I can just snap the same sized object based on whichever object I have selected from my IMM brush, and it'll go ahead and snap to that surface because it's inheriting that surface normal. In fact, I can hit W with this last one selected, and then I can go through here and I can cycle through other objects that are oriented the same way. So I can just swap that out on the fly. So that's pretty cool. Alternatively, I can go up here, I'm going to hold down Alt and kind of reset this gizmo pivot. I can hold down Control and drag out a copy and then let go and then just keep dragging out more copies. In fact, this is kind of getting into the weeds here, but if I undo all of that and I have this brush, insert mesh brush selected, I can even go in here to Brush, Create Nanomesh Brush. So that's gonna, it's kind of weird, but I'm gonna convert this entire brush to a new ZModeler brush, and then when I hover over a face, you're gonna see it's been set to Insert Nanomesh, and now all of these objects have been set to an Insert Nanomesh. So now Insert Nanomesh, we're gonna do Polygroup All. So now if I take whatever, the Phillips screw we had earlier, and I drag this out, it's going to insert a nanomesh onto my object. And in fact, now that I've done that, onto my object based on the polygroups here, so we can see we have purple polygroup here and here, it inserted those. And in fact, I can even go down here with my nanomesh menu. We can go down here to H tile and V tile, so I can go in here and say maybe 5 and 5. And then I can choose a different pattern. So right now it's set to grid. I can just sit at the border, and now I can have screws set to the border of all of those, the edges that we have on our object. So totally cool. And if we want those to be real pieces of geometry, because right now they're instances, so if I go through here with my move brush and move these around, they're going to follow the underlying mesh. But if I'm cool with that and I want these screws to be real geometry, I'm going to go down here to Inventory, say 1 to Mesh, and now we have a cube with screws on it, all one part of one subtool. So what I can do is I can hold down Control Shift. I'm going to switch this to Select Rectangle. I'm going to hold down Control Shift and just select a piece of that cube. Do Control Shift A, which is Visibility, Grow All, and then I can go in here to Split, Hidden, and then now those screws are on their own separate subtool here. So I can manipulate them separately from our previous subtool here. That doesn't really solve, well, how do I have a separate subtool here and want to snap it to that one here? In this instance, it does make more sense to, instead of like trying to snap a screw shape to an object, just use an IMM brush, right? So just watching myself, there was kind of a solution that I didn't completely realize. So if I want to snap this edge to this edge, basically this surface to that surface, what I can do is I can hold down Shift and just rotate this here so they're both there. If I turn on transparency, I can go over here and I can Alt tap this object, and I want to say I want to align everything to this right edge. I'm going to say, okay, align all my subtools to that right edge, but that's going to stick it inside the object there. But what we can do is we can Alt tap this one. I'm going to rotate it around. So now if I go back to this object and say, okay, align everything to left edge, it's aligned correctly to that surface. However, it's inside the object. I can just take this object here, hit W. I'm going to go into solo mode here. I'm going to Alt tap on that surface, and then I can just hold down Shift and rotate that 180 degrees. And now this surface is technically aligned to that surface. Kind of a couple hoops, but doable. Now there is ways, if you hit W and you want to like have this gizmo position also be the gizmo position of this object, you can go through and you can temporarily like merge things together, then split them back apart, and it'll inherit, you know, that I mean, I guess I'll go ahead and do it. So you can see this object here has this gizmo position. If I Alt tap this one, there's that gizmo position. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this off, and I'm going to guess, so here's my duplicate. I'm going to move this, here's the bent arrow. I'm going to move this above the smaller object, go down here to merge down. There we go. So now this small object now has been merged with the duplicate of the larger object here. So if I hold down Control Shift and get rid of this larger object, Geometry Modify Topology, delete Hidden, it still maintains that pivot. So we'll go ahead and bring our other object back. So now this object here has the pivot or the pivot of the original this object here. So now if I wanted to like rotate around this object's pivot, I can certainly do that. Kind of messy. I don't know how useful that is, but that's one thing you can do. So long story short, as far as like, without making this an IMM brush, which I can easily do, I can go to the side here, hit B, create insert mesh, new, and now this square, this cube object that we have is now an IMM brush, so I can select this cube. Let's go into solo mode, and then I can just drag this cube out on this object however I'd like, and it'll automatically snap to the surface of that object, because again, it's inheriting that object's surface normal when I drag it out. But it's not really taking another subtool and snapping it to that object, but just an option if that's something feasible for you. Now, as far as component snapping, if I wanted to, like, say, take this vert here and snap it to this one, and that one, as far as I know, there's no real subtool communication between two separate objects. So an easier way to do that would be have these two objects, go down here, I'm just saying merge down, so now they're all part of one subtool. And then I can hold down Control Alt, just like we did with our other components. I've already got this pivot set, but I can hold down Alt and just set that pivot. And now I can literally just scale this here and just remove that gap. So essentially, I've taken those verts and snapped them to the surface of this object. Now, if I wanted to snap, if I undo that, if I wanted to snap these corners here, but keep them two separate objects with these two surfaces here, that's a little bit trickier. I don't suppose you can go into, like, you know, BZM, ZModeler Brush, hover over here, move points with an attraction, and then it like, you could maybe snap these verts, but that's kind of painful. And again, these aren't open edges, so it's probably not going to snap. So that one I don't really have a good answer for. If you do have a great answer for that, again, if there's scripts and stuff, for sure, you know, put them in the comments. But as far as like base vanilla ZBrush functionality, I'm not sure how to do that. However, if these are two open objects, I'm going to hold down Alt with ZModeler Brush, hover over face, hold down Alt and paint these, and then again, hover over face, say delete polygroup all, and then we can just delete those two. Now snapping components is a little bit easier, and I'll show you why in just a second. So for example, you could probably go in here and say move points by brush. There we go, and it will snap here, so you can snap this and then snap this. What's easier than that, though, is again, we now have two open holes. So let's go ahead and just say bridge two holes, U to U. Oops, U to U. There we go. And now those are bridged, and then again, we can do like an insert single edge loop, hold down Alt. And now those verts have been, instead of extruding edges out, we can just bridge those two. And then again, it's like, well, I wanted to snap these verts here. Well, you can just say insert single edge loop, hold down Alt and get rid of those. And now essentially it's the same effect as snapping those verts. Or you could even go in here and hover over this edge and say collapse poly loop, and then you can just collapse. I'm basically collapsing one side to the other. To make that a little more obvious, let's go ahead and say bevel edge loop complete. And I'm going to hit Control W, make it all one poly group here. There we go. So if I want to snap this vert to this vert, instead of going through here and saying, you know, snapping this and point snapping all this, hover over an edge, and you can say either collapse a single edge, you can collapse this edge to this direction, or collapse this one to this one, or you can do the entire loop. So collapse poly loop, either this side or this side, just whichever side you want. Just move your mouse and it'll go ahead and select that for you. So same thing here. I'm just collapsing the poly group to one side or collapsing it down to the other side. Of course, if you wanted those to be two separate objects, well, now you'd have to go through here and say, okay, Control Shift Drag over there, went through there, split, hidden, go into solo mode here. You could try doing like a close convex hole and then go back in here and say, you know, delete edge and just, there we go, delete edges out of here, maybe do a group by normals, which we've already talked about. Not real great, and of course we still have a hole on this side. So again, in order to have, you know, two separate subtools that have component identification of each other, not really easy to do. Again, it's all kind of based around that BI brush insert industrial parts. And again, we have primitives in here, so BIT, and then hit M, or just go up here and select, and then it's like, oh, I want to have a cube snap to this, and this is a cube, so it's going to be just a nice simple cube. And again, you can hold down Shift and snap that. In fact, if you're ever dragging out, and again, if you want to make these cubes all the same size, just hold down Control, and it'll snap in the same size. However, it is going to kind of swim here, so in this instance I might just hold down Shift, and here's a good example. So now I'm holding down Shift and it's like the orientation's kind of off, I do have a video on this. It's called ZBrush IMM Axis Orientation Snapping, but I'll just talk about it real quick. If you hit W, that's our gizmo. If you go up here and turn this off or hit Y, it'll make it transpose, and you can see it's kind of skewed a little bit. I'm just going to drag that transpose line here to here. That's going to straighten out my transpose. Hit Y to go back into gizmo, Q to actually go back into my primitives, and now when I hold down Shift, it'll snap to the correct orientation. So in this instance, if I wanted multiple copies of this, instead of using, I'll use IMM for the original snapping placement. That's setting this gizmo orientation exactly where I want it on the surface. And then if I want more of these, I can hold down Control and just drag out a copy of these. Or if I have, well, make this a separate subtool first, just go in here, say Split Unmask Points. That'll go ahead and put this object into its own subtool here. And then I can just Control drag out a copy. Or I can use Geometry Stager, and I can like set a home stage and then set a target stage, and then I can actually, let's go in here to my stages count, we'll say 3, and then I can interpolate between those and it'll add more copies in between. And I can also go in here to my align and distribute these objects. Again, you can go to the description and watch those videos if you like. But at least now you're getting the snapping and the distribution of an object. But just as a recap, I'm going to really quickly do this again. Again, we're going to grab a plane 3D, go into Make Polymesh 3D. If you just need to snap verts, and it's all part of one subtool, so if you have, say you want to snap these verts, it's easy enough. You just want to move to a brush radius and snap. Or again, edge, extrude with attraction turned on. And you can even do an entire row and snap them. Or a single edge, just extrude, tap Alt once, there we go. We can, again, snap those together. You can't bridge between here, but you can bridge between edges. So instead of bridging between two holes, because we don't really have, I mean, the whole back of the object's a hole technically, we can bridge edges, and then you can just click on this edge and then this edge, and then just bridge between those, and then it'll automatically snap all these verts together. But if we go in here and we say extrude all polygons, hold down Alt and mark these, and then we'll say QMesh, polygroup all, and pull these back. Again, do a group by normals, and then say delete polygroup all and polygroup all. You now have two holes here, and you can bridge between two holes. Now in this instance, it is going to leave, there's an extra face down there we need to resolve, but that's how you would bridge between two holes there. And then again, QMesh, you can go through here and you can say QMesh, either a polygroup all or a single poly. So if we do polygroup all, we can take this entire polygroup on this side and it'll automatically snap over to there. Perfect. Or you can do it polygon by polygon. So QMesh a single poly and just snap, snap, snap. There you go. And the opposite. If you want to pull back through, you can just get rid of these. And then again, I'm going to hold down Alt, paint over these, delete, bridge, two holes, U to U, and it's kind of crisscrossing over. I'm just gonna, there we go. And then again, insert single edge loop, hold down Alt, and just delete that edge loop out of there. But unfortunately, if I hit W and then just Control drag out a copy here, and I just have an arbitrary surface or an arbitrary object, even if it's part of one subtool, I don't know of a way to like, hey, snap this pivot to this surface exactly. You can eyeball it and get it close enough, but that I'm not certain how to do. Or if this was like, if I do a split unmask points, and now we have two subtools in here, and I want to say, I want to snap this subtool to this other subtool, this other arbitrary surface. I don't know of a real elegant way to do that if the align options aren't going to do it for you.